Pokemon Pokopia just might be a big deal, and well, okay, maybe that's a bit of Pokopium going on there, but this game's really interesting, so obviously releasing in a little more than a week, and on top of that, like about a week after Pokemon Day, so very interesting release window for one thing. We would get some games in like the March-ish area, but that was only for the English release for some of the DS games. Now that Pokemon has gone over to the worldwide release, most of them release in October or November, around that time, except for Legends Arceus. Very weird one. But Pokopia, point is, we're going to have a fun Pokemon adventure during the spring of this year, and then going into whatever gets announced at Pokemon Day, which, by the way, this happening before then. So, very interesting game. When it was first revealed, it wasn't necessarily something that I was super interested in, you know, like, what a little life sim game, you know, your funny little jokes about Pokemon Minecraft, even though, you know, it's only the environments that are cubes, but, the more details we got about this game, it got a little more interesting, obviously being co-developed by Koei Tecmo, who had done the Dragon Quest Builder series, and that kind of seems like that is more or less the type of game it's going to be. Everybody starts in about the same area, you get to explore and so on and so on, grow your little area, your little community of Pokemon there, and the more gameplay we've gotten, it seems really charming and fun. Not necessarily something that Pokemon has done all that much before. You know, they've had elements of like building stuff and not necessarily full life sim games, but a little hints here and there. This one being very interesting. You know, we've gotten quite a bit of it too, even as the game is just about to come out. We just got the Nintendo Treehouse event that showed off some more gameplay. There were some interviews, so on and so on. The Famitsu interview, right, was a pretty big one. This is with Omori as well as some of the other developers of it, but Omori we know from Pokemon, who has worked on Pokemon games. And one thing I did really like, I found was interesting, is like some of the inspiration of the game, how Omori talks about that when he was developing Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, you know, editing the map and placing things here and there, he kind of got the idea of like, hey, what if this was a game or something, or what if this was like an idea, and that, you know, just the fact that the seeds of it were all the way back then and now coming to actually becoming a game. That is the other thing, is that this game is Game Freak, right? Obviously it's still a spin-off game, but the only other spin-off game that Game Freak had really worked on, I believe, was Pokemon Quest, you know, another Minecraft one, right? But this one's still obviously being like full-on a spin-off game. There's lore, there is a story, as we can see here. You know, we've got some interesting characters, and I just love all the art released of the unique special Pokemon that are going to be in this game. But, you know, not that this is going to tie into anything in the main series. I think that's pretty clear, just with the concept of it. You got, you know, Ditto turning into a person, you have these weird alternate forms of Pokemon, which I believe are one-offs and, you know, not like separate species or anything, but just fun ideas. And obviously just seeing like the Game Freak logo on everything is interesting. But I think that also just kind of says that, you know, maybe there's a bit more put into it. We're in a point where I feel like on the Nintendo Switch spin-off games for Pokemon, not that they've been few and far between, but we got, you know, maybe only 3, right, on the Switch. 3 that I can think of, like, and I'm talking about spin-off games like full-on experiences. There's a beginning, middle, and end story, good amount to do, get a physical release. Well, you know, Pokopia physical release, right? Pokopia would be the 4th. But even then, one of those was Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, the DX version. One of them was New Pokemon Snap. That is a big, cool, full one, and that one I highly recommend if you haven't played it. Then we got Detective Pikachu 2, which was certainly a game. But now in the Nintendo Switch era, starting things off pretty strong, or Nintendo Switch 2 era, starting things off pretty strong. That's at least what I see. And I know obviously the gameplay isn't going to be everybody's cup of tea, because it is very much like, all right, you know, you're going to start from zero and start building things up. But at the very least, I think it is going to be like a fun one. I don't think that this is going to be an extremely popular game. We're going to see people playing it, and for the comparisons to Animal Crossing that it has, it's definitely not going to have anywhere near the impact of Animal Crossing. But I know for sure at least a good amount of Pokemon fans will play it, you know, as long as they're willing to spend the $70 for it. But I think it's really cool and fun. The Treehouse event for it was also pretty cool. That was held on Nintendo's YouTube channel. We got to see a good amount of the gameplay as well as some of the multiplayer as well, which I think is going to be more of the fun aspect to it. And I think it looks cool and fine. Definitely has this certain type of art style here. But I think that the gameplay definitely is something that you need to get your hands on, because otherwise I don't think the gameplay was all that interesting to watch. It was like, oh, you know, curious, more of a bit of a tutorial, or like, hey, here's some of the very beginnings of the game if you haven't already watched the multiple trailers. So one of them was like a 9-minute trailer even. The previews that lots of news outlets put out about 2 weeks ago, give or take. So I think that it is really one of those ones that you do need to get your hands on to actually play. But there was also like a physical demo, I believe, at some European events last week, give or take. But here's the thing. It looks kind of not boring. I don't want to say, okay, it looks kind of boring, I think, when you're watching somebody else play it. This is definitely one that I'll need to get my hands on, because otherwise, like I said, just one of those like, oh, that's very curious. Okay, we're kind of running through the tutorial, so I almost recommend, like, maybe don't watch this unless you're like super skeptical. But I think, seeing the trailers, you kind of get an idea of what there is. Lore wise, again, I know this isn't going to connect to anything fully, but at one point they did call something Pallet Town, or they did name drop Pallet Town in this gameplay here. Like, definitely looks cute and nice. I think that's going to be the fun part, is playing this game and taking screenshots, sharing them everywhere, and playing with friends also. That'll be fun as well. But I think the main thing is that it's a new idea that Pokemon is trying out. It's also seeing kind of Game Freak expand a little more, because we know that Game Freak already has different teams, and again, mostly this is Koei Tecmo, and I believe it's W Force of Koei Tecmo developing this, which, like I said, multiple teams under Koei Tecmo. And Pokemon, even then, they're not putting a whole lot of like Game Freak staff on this, but there are a good amount of them here. Obviously, Omori is working on this game. He's kind of the one heading it up because it was mostly his idea. So I think that in that sense, it's showing a way for somebody who has worked on Pokemon who has been there for a while and worked on some very beloved games in the series, and taking some of the things that he learned from there, or some of the ideas that he kind of built up from there that maybe wouldn't necessarily fit into a main series type of Pokemon game. Like, again, building a little world and a place to really show the Pokemon's personalities, as we read in the Famitsu interview. That's something that you kind of get to play around with in here. So that's kind of what I want to see a little more for spin-off games going forward. And let me see, like, what, 8 years of the Nintendo Switch and getting 3 of those games. And again, I'm counting the spin-off games that are bigger sort of adventures, not necessarily the Pokemon Go's types, like nothing on mobile. Even though those games are still fun, I think that there is a huge difference between these games that are more like take a long time to complete. Again, kind of at a beginning, middle, and end. And I know the story, maybe it's not necessarily going to be a huge thing in Pokopia, but the fact that they're showing off, yes, there is some sort of story to tell, or there is like a beginning, a middle, and end point, even though there is still probably going to be updates, and the main type of gameplay is something that you can take at your own pace, and something that you can also enhance with multiplayer and interacting with the community online. So still very different. So I would say Animal Crossing, Dragon Quest Builders type of game. Apparently, some of the reviews are even saying it's a lot more similar to Viva Pinata, which I have not played, but I guess some people were really interested on that, so that'll be fun. I think more so the aspect of inviting different Pokemon and kind of having them roam around and do their own thing while also contributing to what you're building. Definitely I want to stream this game when it comes out. It does release on a Thursday, so maybe I'll do like a first impression stream, and then the full Friday we'll stream that as well. I don't know if this is going to become like a weekly sort of thing, because I feel like the type of game it is one that you can definitely talk a lot about during the week it comes out, maybe complete the story, or again, I don't know how long it's going to take to actually finish the story or get into any of the lore, which we didn't really see a whole lot of in the gameplay here, or right now this is some of the multiplayer gameplay. But the portion that they showed off mostly in the treehouse, they kind of skipped over the intro. And I don't know how much there is going to be to dissect and to look into, but definitely at least, maybe I'll do like 1 or 2 theory discussion videos, maybe 1, and then maybe like a full review of it. But for one thing, it does also use the real-time clock in terms of the environment. The day and night is dictated by the actual day and night of wherever you are. And in terms of things that need to build or take time to build, they will be using real time. So I don't know how quickly some people might be able to complete this game, and not necessarily knowing what's lying at the very end of it, story-wise or character-wise. For sure, I think it's going to be mostly cute little moments and potentially building some sort of lore, because something is going on here that I mean, we're living in the post-apocalypse here. It's a fun idea though. But yeah, I really just want to get out a few more thoughts here and there based on some of the recent stuff. Again, the gameplay previews that we got, that Famitsu interview, and the new art that we got to see of a lot of those characters, as well as again the Nintendo Treehouse that literally just happened. And I think kind of taking this all in, I'm very curious and very interested. But I think that probably the second trailer that came out that was a little more story based, that was some of the most interesting that we had gotten leading up to the release, because it was giving us a little bit of a hint of, hey, you know, here are some sort of story details, here are some interesting new Pokemon that are individual characters in the game, and also here's a little bit of a better idea of how the game is going to be playing. Meanwhile, every other little piece of it is more just kind of showing what type of the game this is and leading more people to say, hey, this is something I want to try out, or leading other people to say like, you know, maybe not for me. I definitely don't expect this to sell a whole lot, especially being exclusive to the Nintendo Switch 2, which, while they've sold a lot, definitely is a much smaller install base than the regular Nintendo Switch, which at this point would do really well if you were to release it on that. So I'm at least hoping that maybe it is on the Nintendo Switch 2 for a reason. I would expect that to be the case because it seems like it's going to be a pretty big landscape, so we'll see how all that works out. But I guess for the most part, let me know what you think in the comments. Are you at all interested in Pokemon Pokopia? Is this one you're going to be getting on release day, waiting a while for, or do you still need your Nintendo Switch 2 in order to try it out? Yeah, there's a whole thing about the key card, so I'm definitely not going to be buying the key card. I'm just going to download it so I can circumvent the issues or whatever of the key cards, because I'm still pretty against those. But like I said, I just want to do sort of a wrap up of everything that we've gotten in the last few weeks, because I haven't really talked about it on the main channel all that much. But now that I'm kind of back here, maybe this is something that we can do a bit more often, just based on all the information that we've gotten post the first two trailers. Because really I only talked about it maybe in the second trailer that was a little more story focused, because then there was a little more for me to dissect and to look into and potentially predict based on connections to other Pokemon games or other elements in the Pokemon universe, which is again my favorite thing to do on the channel. But I think that just every little piece of information that we've gotten so far hasn't really been anything huge, but has been more of a building towards something. So I'm definitely going to be interested to play this. I think it's going to be a nice, fun, maybe not a distraction, but just a thing to do again during the spring into summer for Pokemon. And that's not even counting whatever else we get on Pokemon Day, whether it be other little mini spin-off games, maybe on mobile or other events, and then whatever game potentially will be coming out at the very end of this year, combined with, I mean, hey, we get Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, so we all get to relive through that again. But on the upside, I think that having that big preview last week, having it featured in the Nintendo Treehouse, which went on for quite a while, and on top of that, also the fact that the game comes out in like a week, I don't think that we'll be seeing too much of Pokemon Pokopia during the actual Pokemon Day Presents. Maybe just a bit of a reminder saying, hey, this game's still coming out, we'll see you in a week when it releases, and then move on to everything else, like all the other spin-off games and other announcements that they're going to be making on that day. So like I said, leave a comment below, let me know what you think, your thoughts on the game. Are you going to be playing it, or, you know, whatever else you decide to do instead that's maybe Pokemon related, maybe not Pokemon related, in the time between now and potentially whatever releases in November, October, December, that time period. Anyway, this is Gatorex on the second channel. I will catch you all later.